I'm Keith Olbermann, and this is The Resistance. Lost in the cacophony of launched missiles in Syria and dropped bombs in Afghanistan and rattled sabers in Korea, drowned out by the clamoring dissonance of conflicting policies about China and Assad and NATO, shouted over by the crises of Sean Spicer and Paul Manafort and Eric Trump, and always, forever, distracted from by the little whir and clicking sounds of a recorder being switched on and off, supported by the remorseless background drumbeat of the Russian election scandal, there is a terrifying new fact. The president is getting crazier. This statement is somewhat akin to rhetorically asking if today here in hell it is hotter than it was yesterday. But in the last week, just in the last week, the feather-light grip on reality of Trump's tiny hands has seemingly gotten much looser, much faster. The most obvious, though hardly the most disturbing evidence of some kind of deepening illness or damage or madness or what does the cause matter any longer was the latest barrage of tweets like the fake media parentheses, not real media end parentheses tweet Monday morning, but especially the string of tweets on Easter. In 83 short minutes, Trump moved from a simpleton's rationalization of his complete 180 on Chinese currency manipulation to the implication that he had forgotten it was a holiday and he needed to say Happy Easter, to boasting about his election as if it were the answer to everything, to using that election as an excuse for reneging on one of his campaign promises, to paranoid fantasies about paid protesters, to then insisting his election should not be the answer to everything, to a random boast about American military strength, which, if it were connected to the previous tweet, could easily and terrifyingly be read as a tacit threat to suppress American protesters with American military force. The president is getting crazier. It is possible that this string of 5 word explosions could be only that, merely a sign of a lazy, damaged, unfocused mind wandering off on its own again. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or adult attention disorder, or not really an adult sanity disorder, just taking a stroll on a lazy holiday weekend. But this wasn't a lazy holiday weekend. Literally 24 hours before those tweets, there was urgent reason to think we might be bombing North Korea. There had been no accord, there had been no stand down, and had there been no Korean missiles self-destructing and dropping infinitely from the sky, there would have been no relief from the crisis. And Sunday morning, the, quote, president, unquote, was obsessed with how many votes he got in the Electoral College 5 months ago, as if anyone, anywhere, at any time besides him thinks that this weak victory there is by itself an explanation and a justification for his broken promises about releasing his taxes. And North Korea? North Korea went from inspiring a joke on Saturday Night Live with Melissa McCarthy as Sean Spicer, suggesting we should eat all the chocolate eggs we want because it was going to be our last Easter on Earth, to being relegated to almost an afterthought to the real Trump's rationalizations about his other broken promises about designating China as a currency manipulator. In the disordered mind of the commander-in-chief, North Korea had been figuratively, if not literally, the end of the world, but overnight was reduced to being not nearly as much of a threat as the Trump tax return protesters. The president is getting crazier. And it's not as if he had spent the preceding week or even the preceding 72 hours focused just on North Korea. In our collective national trip inside the kaleidoscopic roller coaster mind of this unstable man, does anybody even remember the Moab? The 22,000-pound bomb dropped in Afghanistan? Or the stunt attack on the Syrian airbase that didn't even have the ability to disable the Syrian airbase? The Moab was Thursday, 7 days after Syria. Thursdays have apparently become blow stuff up days. And of course, Trump had already forgotten into which country he had those missiles fired. So what happens is, I said, we've just launched 59 missiles heading to Iraq, and I want you to know that. And he was eating his cake, and he was silent. And Maria Bartiromo, who used to be a journalist, interrupts him and says, to Syria? Yes, heading towards Syria. In other words, we've just launched 59 missiles heading towards Syria. No, those aren't other words. Those things, quote, we've just launched 59 missiles heading to Iraq, and, quote, we've just launched 59 missiles heading towards Syria. These are not two different descriptions of the same thing. They are two different things with two utterly different world-changing sets of consequences. And they are two things that a president says in an interview in which he also expresses his amazement about the unmanned missiles as if there were manned missiles. And the only thing he says with clear conviction or unmuddied memory is, quote, "We had the most beautiful piece of chocolate cake that you've ever seen." They are two things a president says when he is getting crazier. Only a president who is getting crazier would admit going into a meeting with the president of China with a long-standing assumption that the Chinese could just wave a magic wand and stop North Korea, but figuring out this was not true after only 10 minutes of conversation, while not realizing that there are 9-year-old children in this country with a better grasp on North Korea than he has. Only a president who is getting crazier would flip-flop on the Import-Export Bank, and flip-flop on NATO, and flip-flop on his own promise on Chinese currency manipulation, and flip-flop on his own promise on his tax returns, and flip-flop on his Syria policy, and flip-flop on his top advisor, and all of that in just barely over a week while bombing 2 countries and threatening a third and only correctly remembering 2 of their 3 names. We don't like to admit this here, but it has often served our American purposes just as certainly as it has served Kim Jong-un's purposes to have leaders, or indeed even commanders-in-chief, who verged on seeming madness. Kissinger used to tell the Russians that Richard Nixon was a madman. Ronald Reagan let the same country believe he actually viewed them as the evil empire from Star Wars. Barry Goldwater wanted to nuke North Vietnam, and George Wallace's vice presidential candidate was an ex-general who wanted to nuke Vietnam, Russia, and maybe China. And the Russian records from the Cuban Missile Crisis suggest Khrushchev thought John F. Kennedy might have been literally insane. It can be a tactic, but it can only work as a tactic if there remains the likelihood that the president really is not crazy. And with every passing week, and every passing day, and every passing hour, there is less and less evidence that this president really is not crazy. What is rapidly becoming the paramount fact of the 21st century, the event overshadowing everything else from 9/11 to climate change, continues to be largely ignored even though it is an existential threat to the future of mankind. There are millions of Americans, millions of others around the world, even millions who despise these policies and hate this man, who are standing so close to the bark that they can't see the trees, let alone the forest. President Let Me Eat Cake over here is crazy, getting crazier, and he will descend quickly into full-on hallucinatory, meet my invisible friend, why do we have nukes if we don't use nukes crazy, while our only hope to remove him, our political system, destroyed by 25 years of utter partisanship and complete denial and the placement of a price tag on virtually everything and everybody in our country, is no longer capable of even pulling off a successful White House Easter egg hunt. He is getting crazier. Resist. Peace. By the way, if you enjoy these, I am proud to announce that coming in October, my book of these commentaries called Trump is Effing Crazy. It'll be available wherever books are available.